India and China have witnessed mounting tensions at the border at the LAC in Ladakh. Now, what is happening? Is it likely to get worse? And what is the government doing to try and diffuse the situation? Also, what are these series of high-level meetings that have been held recently to talk about the situation? To answer these questions, I have with me Snehesh Philip, who tracks defense for ThePrint and who's also been tracking this very important development for us. This, as you know, is a live edition of Government Matters, so do send in your questions. We are waiting for them. Snehesh, so just let's do a quick recap of all that has happened over the last few weeks. How did it begin and where are we now?
Well, it began towards the end of April. That is when Chinese had objected to certain construction that the Indians were doing on its side of the LAC, that is a line of actual control. Before I go further, I think the viewers should remember that there is no fixed border between India and China.
Right.
What is known as the line of actual control. There are some areas where there's a difference in perception of where exactly this line starts or ends.
Right.
From each side. So the Chinese had objected to certain activities construction activities that India was carrying out in two specific areas. One was the finger area in Pangong Lake, and another about 200 kilometers away in the Galwan
Right.
Valley. In the finger area on the 5th of May, in the evening, a large number of Chinese troops came in at a particular position that the Indian troops were in. They were overwhelmed. These Chinese came in with sticks, with stones, and it was a fist fight that happened there, which
right.
left several Indian soldiers as well as Chinese soldiers
In fact,
injured.
we had done a Government Matters then, I remember, to discuss
Yes.
what had happened, right? The immediate provocation.
So following this confrontation that happened, of course, the tensions really escalated. And the Chinese, who were already objecting to a certain road construction activity in the Galwan Valley, which relates to a particular side road or a feeder road that was being constructed from the main, the DBO road that was inaugurated last year by the Defense Minister Rajnath Singh. The Chinese moved in their troops forward.
Right.
So remember that China was at that time in India, if I'm not mistaken, it was in November last year 2019 when India carried out a massive exercise in the Ladakh sector.
Right.
The Chinese were doing this exercise this time during this period, and the Chinese moved in a large number of soldiers from the particular exercise and moved them towards the LAC. So there was a situation where suddenly you had Chinese coming forward into areas, some which are actually Chinese territory, setting up camps, because since the troops have moved forward, there needs to be place for them to stay. The trucks that moved in, which brings in the soldiers forward. There were communication devices that were set up. There were observation posts that were set up. So yes, so that's what basically happened.
So now, Snehesh, nobody really wants such an escalated situation at the LAC. I'm sorry. What is the government doing to try and diffuse the situation? We understand there were meetings held yesterday. What was discussed? Is there a plan in place?
Well, as I said, when initially the Chinese moved in, the fact is that the Indians were caught off guard by this particular sudden movement by China. But however, there are two things to this particular issue. One is the military
Right.
counter to the Chinese aggression on the LAC,
Right.
and then there's a diplomatic as well as a political counter
So
to
it's
it.
a tactical versus diplomatic.
Yeah, but so it's a tactical thing. So on the ground, as far as the military is concerned, the Chinese, the Indian Army has gone in for what we've reported earlier in the past is for mirror deployment. Mirror deployment basically is a term that is used to signify that we will match every move of China, every deployment of China with our own deployment. Let's say, for example, Chinese have brought in 200 soldiers in one
Right.
location.
So
India will push in 200 soldiers
Right.
in that location. If there are 50 bunkers, India will also set up 50 bunkers. So this is a mirror deployment that has taken place in Galwan Valley, and in the and in the hot spring, the larger hot spring
Right.
area, where transgressions have taken place. So that is happening. The Indians have also built up the troop level in Ladakh, especially in eastern Ladakh. At the same time, the Indian army has also gone ahead and taken proactive preventive deployment. Now, this is a term that
Right.
was told to me by a very senior, by the sources in the establishment. The proactive preventive deployment has been taken not only in Ladakh, but also in the central sector as well. Central sector, I mean the Uttarakhand side of the LAC. So the India is matching troop with troop, the Chinese troops with the troops.
Right.
At the same time, there were a series of talks. So remember that the tensions at the LAC is not unusual.
Correct.
It has happened in the past also, where Chinese have transgressed. That's a term that is used. Transgressed into territories which India considers as their own. There have been sit-ins, there have been face-offs. But what is different this time is that these face-offs and transgressions have happened over a wide area with a larger deployment of troops on both sides.
Right. So, Snehesh, many are asking this question: is it Doklam too? I mean, the last time this became such a big issue, the standoff. Of course, the situation was different, the context was different, but in terms of the tension, in terms of the extent of the standoff.
Well, Doklam was, Doklam is different from,
Right,
a lot of
sure,
people
the
are
context
comparing
is
Doklam
different.
because remember that Doklam happened not on Indian soil. Doklam
Correct.
was something, this face-off which lasted for about 72 days or 71 days actually took place in a third
Bhutan,
country.
right.
This was in Bhutan. Yes, there was a standoff that took place, but and which led to tensions. But this time the standoff is happening at the LC directly between India and
But
China.
I think the question is more about the extent of the strain in relations between the two countries.
The extent of, I think, the Doklam crisis was a larger
Right.
crisis, but then, I would not be able to compare what the Doklam, as I said, Doklam and this particular situation ideally should not be compared to each other. Both have their own specifics, but I can say that this has been one of the, and this is what we've written in the print also, this has
Right.
been one of the highest, one of the biggest ever border tensions witnessed by India since Kargil. And many have questioned the fact that why didn't we mention Parakram, because Parakram, India was almost going to war. But remember that in Parakram, the focus was on the western sector. It
Right.
was not, it was in response to a terror attack carried out by Pakistan. That is the parliament attack. But in this case, this is an actual intrusion or transgression that has taken place, build up of troops on the border because of these activities, which are similar to Kargil when you had
Right. Transgressions.
Kargil was not
Infiltration.
transgression.
Infiltration.
Transgression.
Right.
Kargil was infiltration, intrusion.
Right. Okay, so we already have a bunch of questions, Snehesh. I'll begin with this question we've got on Twitter from Ivan. Can you tell us how far India will be prepared to go if China escalates the matter? There's another question on how much India is willing to climb up the escalatory ladder.
Well, I've mentioned in my stories also, and this is something that India is prepared for the long haul. And when this particular standoff, face-off that is happening has taken place for about 21 days. India is prepared for the long haul. As I mentioned that, that a larger number of troops have been moved into along the LAC. Many of these, remember that all these are forward posts, which are not really, which doesn't have a heavy presence, which have a smaller presence. There are a lot of troops which are in reserve.
Right.
Reserve is a technical term used in the military. So, soldiers from the reserves have been brought in. So, once the reserves get empty, so as the soldiers move out from the reserves get empty, so you have additional troops brought into the reserves. So one of the other important criteria in deployment is the fact that all these places that we're talking about are at very high, it's at heights, in the sense it's over 14,000 feet.
High altitudes, right.
High altitude area. So there's an acclimatization that also needs to be done. It's not that a soldier on the plane, suddenly you can be airdropped right into Ladakh. So there has to be there is an acclimatization process that is there. But yes, India is prepared for the long haul. But at the same time, as I said, there have been talks that have been held at the military level, though nothing concrete has come out of it. But if you remember, Ruhi, last evening we did a story saying that my colleague Nanima and I did a story saying that after a high-level review that was taken at various levels, including at the highest office,
Right.
a decision was taken that while yes, militarily we are going to stand the ground, there would be no ground that would be ceded to the Chinese. But the fact is that the solution for it would be looked forward through talks.
Right.
And
so amicable solution.
That's absolutely right, Ruhi. The right term that was used was amicable solution. And this can come only through talks. So one positive development that has taken place is the fact that today the Chinese Foreign Ministry has issued a statement in which they have said that the situation at the border is in control. You have the Chinese ambassador to India, who in a webinar, as we speak about, the webinar is still going on, but a few minutes back before the session started, said that differences can be resolved and through communication, through
Right.
talks. So that's a good development that has taken
Clearly,
place.
both sides want to see it as needed to be resolved more amicably than through.
But war is always the last option for anything, if that's
Right.
what you're asking.
Okay, Snehesh, so we have a flood of questions. I'm going to quickly ask and you will have to quickly answer. There's a question, another question from Twitter. This is Arun Kumar. What will happen if China starts a war? Does India have the capability to hold China? Will USA help India in that? And is it possible for Pakistan to open a new front in parallel? So it's a three-tiered question.
Well, the first, as I was explaining to Ruhi earlier, that war is the last option. At this particular stage, neither does China or India
Absolutely.
are looking for,
full-fledged war.
egging for a war. The other factor is the fact that whether India is prepared to take on China. Remember that India is not the India of 1962. A lot has changed. A lot of developments have taken place since then. India does have the capability to carry on, and counter China to a very large extent. There's no doubt about the fact that China is a bigger military as far as India is concerned.
Military, economic, everything. So that
Economic, everything. It's a big, but at no point of time should one assume that China would get a walkover as far as India is concerned.
Right, but anyway, that's a hypothetical situation because, as we said, war is the last thing on anybody's mind. Anukul Sharma on Twitter: have the Chinese intruded onto Indian land, or is it just in the realm of the perception of LAC?
See, as I said, there is no fixed territory per se. So in the Galwan Valley, there are two things. One is the Chinese claim line, which is known as the CCL. The other one is the LAC, which India considers, or let's say the Indian claim line. So India believes that the LAC is at a particular point. China believes that the CCL, that is a Chinese claim line, is at a particular point. So there is a territory that is there in between, which in one way, India looks at it as its territory, China looks at it as its territory. Right. In the Galwan Valley, as far as remember that Galwan is which had seen action in the 1962 war. So it was in 1960 that the Chinese moved forward and they extended their CCL,
right.
Which is the Chinese claim line, and eventually a war was fought, and China got over the China continued to control the extended CCL.
Right.
Since then, at the local level, the LAC and CCL is considered to be the same.
Right.
But remember that this is an understanding between the two armies at the local level. There has no maps been exchanged, unlike in the central sector where maps have exchanged. So this can change overnight. But what I've been told by sources is that while there is a forward movement of Chinese soldiers near the LAC, the Chinese have not crossed the CCL.
Right.
However, the CCL and the LAC differs in the hot spring area. That is where the transgression have taken place.
Okay.
But remember that here also, the Chinese have not crossed their Chinese claim line, the CCL. However, their CCL is about 3 kilometers into what India considers as Indian territory. So that is why, I'm saying transgression has taken place there. As far as, I am aware, no transgression has taken place in Galwan. Also in Finger area, transgression has taken place. Finger area, many people have asked what is exactly a finger.
So you can actually log on to our YouTube channel and to our Instagram to watch our daily show. Today I learned a couple of days ago we did explain what the finger area is in detail. So and move on to the next question.
Yes, no, continuing with that. So what has happened in the Pangong Lake side is that India believes that the LAC is at finger 8. China believes that the LAC is at finger 2. So there is a vast area which is under dispute, which India considers their territory, China considers their territory. Here also, the Chinese have moved in, and they've moved in, from the finger 4 area, and have set up, bunkers and brought in heavy vehicles to stop the Indian patrolling team from going beyond finger 3 area.
Right.
So,
okay.
Which means that transgression has taken place there also.
Right. Snehesh, as I said, I have many questions and I have to fit them all in, so you will have to keep your answers a little short. Nilotpal Bharti, PM Modi has worked a lot to improve Indo-China relations. What do you think his strategy will be, dialogue or defense decisions in case the situation worsens? In fact, our colleague Noinima Basu has done a story as to how and why PM Modi as well as Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar are best equipped to perhaps understand Beijing. They've both understood, they've both dealt a lot with China and a lot with Beijing. So is there any larger thinking in place in case the situation worsens at the political level?
As I said, at the political level, there have been discussions that have taken place between the two militaries at the local level. There are discussions that have taken place at the diplomatic level too. At the highest diplomatic levels, there are discussions that are taking place in Beijing too, with the officials there. So I don't see this, so hopefully what everybody's, as I mentioned earlier, the Chinese Foreign Ministry statement today as well as that of the Chinese envoy in India gives an indication, at least some sense of relief to, whoever were thinking that there is a possibility of a war scenario. But remember, as Ruhi rightly mentioned, Jaishankar, who's the foreign minister, is known as the, a Chinese specialist. He has worked, he was posted in China. Right. He was the Indian envoy there. Then he was the foreign secretary. He has dealt with China a lot. Extensively. Now, the other person who is involved in this particular issue is the military, the other service. In the military, the army chief, before he took over as the army chief, he was the, the GOC in C of the Eastern Command. The Eastern Command looks after, the borders with China in the eastern sector. The other person, incidentally, who is also involved is the CDS, General Bipin Rawat. Right. General Bipin Rawat was the army chief when Doklam, took place. So, these people have vast experience as far as
Beijing is concerned.
As far as China, the Beijing and their strategy is concerned.
Right. Now, I have a question from Abhishek on Twitter and also from Mukul Sharma on YouTube, and both are similar questions, so I will rephrase both. Essentially, what both these viewers want to know is whether this is a diversionary tactic because China is dealing with so much backlash on the COVID front, on the fact that it hid the virus and hid how contagious the virus could be, and also is it an effort to put some kind of pressure on India to not come together with other countries and corner China on the issue of COVID?
Well, I'm not really sure about how, as far as it's messaged, as far as COVID is concerned, but there's definitely a step by China to pressurize India. I'm not looking at this particular incident that has taken, series of incidents that have taken place at LAC, through just one lens of it. Remember that there is also an issue that has developed with Nepal, as far as Nepal is concerned. While Nepal has said, that there is no third country which is involved, there's a larger perception that probably China is behind this move, something which has been countered by Nepal. But
the Oli government is known to be close to China.
Yes. So, these incidents cannot be seen through, as different set of series of incidents. There are no, I don't see any coincidence per se. But, I've been talking to officials trying to get a grip on why exactly they think that China has done this. Trust me, Ruhi, but
there are no easy answers. Really.
There are no easy answers for it, and even the people that I've been talking to, I've not been able to, no one can really pinpoint per se, this is why China did it. So there are a number of possibilities, realm of things that are being looked into, and it will only be later, is only when I think one will get a clearer picture of
Right.
what exactly did China have in mind.
But I think, as you correctly pointed out, it's mostly a combination of factors and not one factor. They're all overlapping factors. I'll take one last question. We are really out of time. This is another question from a YouTube viewer. This is an anonymous handle. Looking at the post-Doklam crisis, is there a possibility that a Wuhan-like informal summit will take place again to pacify the current escalation? So we have seen Prime Minister Modi and President Xi take part in summits, in bilateral summits, Wuhan, there was Mamallapuram. So, there has been effort on both sides and still this is happening. So is there something lacking on the diplomatic front? I think I would like to flip the question a little bit.
Well, what is lacking is the fact that there is no clear idea as far as the border issue remains to be settled. So that is something which is lacking.
Right.
So as long as the border dispute, is there, these transgressions, these face-offs will continue to happen. I think, since, as you rightly mentioned, since the Wuhan and the Malappuram summit, instructions have been given out to the commanders on the ground, that is the military commanders, and there have been new SOPs that have been issued that to solve such issues. But however, in this case, this is not a tactical move by, let's say, a commander of the Chinese PLA.
Right.
This is a larger strategic move that China has undertaken, because, as I mentioned, this is not limited to just one sector, it's spread throughout. So this is part of the strategic move by China. But I don't see any summit per se happening between...
Anyway, in COVID times, not possible. But
as I said, COVID time, it's just not possible. And
right.
I don't see any summit happening. But as I said, statements that have come, from the earlier belligerent statements that came out in China, the statements that have come by the Chinese Foreign Ministry in Beijing and by the Chinese envoy in India is actually a welcome change and is an indicator that things could actually cool down and calm down.
Right. Well, Krish, Vikram, Govindraj Naidu, Bhanu Sharma, Sagar Riole, Kisle, many viewers who sent in their questions. I'm sorry, we really were out of time today, but we have started replying to some of your questions on YouTube through comments, and I'm sure Snehesh would be happy to do that. Do keep track of us and stay tuned. We're back with another live at 5 p.m. with our political editor DK Singh with his show Politically Correct, where he talks about how Arvind Kejriwal, the Delhi Chief Minister, has handled the COVID crisis. Thank you so much.
Thank you.